Everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep into something today that I think a lot of you can relate to, forgiveness, but specifically in those close romantic relationships.
Oh yeah, those are always tricky.
Exactly. I think we all know relationships are this mix of beautiful and messy, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
those hurts can really linger. And we're going to unpack all of that with some amazing insights from some of the top relationship experts.
yeah, we've got some really fascinating research to share today.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be really eye-opening for a lot of people. To kick things off, when we talk about forgiveness in relationships,
Right.
what are we really talking about? I feel like it's a loaded word.
Yeah, a lot of people think forgiveness is just like saying, I forgive you and everything's
I've been
fine.
brushing it under the rug.
Yeah, it's exactly. But it's so much deeper than that. Dr. Fred Luskin, he's like a leading expert in forgiveness research. He defines it as basically letting go of the desire for revenge or punishment. So it's about releasing that grip on the anger and resentment that can keep us stuck in the past.
So I guess what you're saying is it's not about saying what happened was okay. It's more about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying that negativity forward.
Exactly. It's like choosing to put down like a heavy weight you've been carrying around for ages.
Oh, I love that analogy.
And when you're lighter and freer, you can move forward in a much healthier way, both as an individual and in the relationship.
So if I'm hearing this right, it sounds like forgiveness is almost like a superpower for couples to navigate those inevitable bumps in the road.
I love that. The
Yeah.
superpower. And research actually supports this. Dr. John Gottman, who's a legend in relationship research, found that couples who hold on to grudges, they basically create this toxic environment for their love to grow.
It's almost like pouring poison into the soil where you're trying to plant a beautiful garden.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, those couples who practice forgiveness, they can create this more resilient, fulfilling connection. They learn to overcome challenges together and build a bond that can weather any storm.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to see how this isn't just some fluffy feel-good concept. This is like a vital ingredient for a strong, healthy relationship.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, what about the impact on the individual? We talk about the couple, but what about me?
Yeah, that's such a good point because forgiveness, it's not just about the other person. It's a profound gift you give to yourself.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and Dr. Brené Brown, she's done some incredible work on vulnerability and shame. She says it beautifully that forgiveness is about taking our power back. It's a conscious choice to heal, even when the wound is still raw.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That really resonates with me because I've definitely had times where holding on to resentment felt like carrying around a giant suitcase full of rocks, and it weighs you down. It keeps you from moving forward.
Yeah, totally. And that's why letting go through forgiveness can be so liberating. It's about choosing to step out of the darkness of anger and resentment and into the light of healing and peace.
Okay, so it sounds like we're talking about transforming the way we relate to ourselves and our partners. But I'm still curious, how does this actually play out? Like, how does forgiveness actually make love stronger? What's the magic formula?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's break it down into 3 key ways that forgiveness can transform a relationship, and we'll use some real-life scenarios
Oh, perfect. I love that.
and insights from the experts.
Yeah, let's unpack this.
Okay, so imagine this. You and your partner have this huge fight, maybe one of those blowouts, where things are said that you both regret later,
Mm-hmm.
and in the aftermath, you're both hurt and angry.
Mm-hmm.
The air is thick with tension.
I think we've all been there.
Right, and that's where forgiveness becomes essential. First, it allows you to rebuild trust. Dr. Sue Johnson, she's the developer of emotionally focused therapy. She emphasizes that forgiveness is really the key to mending broken trust.
Especially after a betrayal or a big rift in the connection.
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button and saying, okay, we messed up, but we're committed to working through this together.
So it's about choosing to believe in your partner again, even after a major setback.
Exactly. And you know what? Sometimes that act of forgiveness can actually deepen the trust more than if the betrayal had never happened.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
It's like the relationship goes through this trial by fire and comes out stronger on the other side.
I like that.
And this leads us to the second way. Forgiveness can transform love. It fosters emotional intimacy.
Okay.
When you think about it, when you hold on to resentment, it creates this wall between you and your partner.
You're constantly on guard, afraid to be vulnerable because you might get hurt again.
Exactly. But forgiveness creates this safe haven where you can let your guard down and really connect. Dr. Harriet Lerner, she's a well-known relationship expert, she talks about how forgiveness creates a space for real emotional honesty,
Hmm.
for sharing your deepest fears and vulnerabilities without that fear of judgment.
So it's like forgiveness creates a space where deeper intimacy can blossom.
Exactly.
I love that.
And then the third way forgiveness strengthens love might surprise you.
Hmm.
It's all about personal growth.
Oh, now that is surprising. I always thought of it as something you do for the other person, and
Yeah.
like letting them off the hook.
There is that element.
Okay.
But Dr. Luskin, he makes a powerful point that forgiveness isn't just a gift to your partner. It's a gift you give to yourself.
Okay. How?
When you forgive, you're releasing yourself from that bitterness and resentment that can just eat away at you. It's like you're choosing to break free from all that negativity
Yeah.
and embrace a more peaceful state of mind. And that inner peace, it spills over into all areas of your life, including your relationship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so by learning to forgive, you're not only strengthening your bond with your partner, but you're also evolving as an individual
Mm-hmm.
and cultivating a deeper sense of inner peace.
Okay. So now it's feeling less about the other person and more about like a state of being almost.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's not just for the relationship, it's for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to get it, but now I'm thinking, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but
Ah.
actually forgiving someone, especially if they've really hurt you, can be really hard.
Oh, absolutely.
Our listeners are probably like, yeah, tell me something. I don't know.
You're right. It's not easy. Dr. Terry Orbeck, she's a renowned sociologist and relationship expert.
Mm-hmm.
She points out that a lot of people resist forgiveness because they think it makes them look weak or like they're letting the other person off the hook.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
But the thing is, forgiveness is anything but weak
Okay. Why is that?
because it takes incredible strength and courage to face that hurt, to acknowledge the pain, and make the conscious decision to let go of the resentment.
Okay, I like that reframe because you know you're choosing to let go. So what are some of those roadblocks that keep us from really forgiving, even when we know it's good for us?
Fear is a big one. If you've been hurt before, it's understandable to be afraid of opening yourself up to that possibility again. Vulnerability can feel risky, especially after betrayal.
Makes sense.
And then there's the feeling of being unheard or unacknowledged. It's hard to truly forgive if you feel like your partner hasn't really grasped the impact of their actions or shown genuine remorse.
Feeling validated is like a key ingredient in the healing process.
It's huge. And then, of course, pride. Sometimes our ego gets in the way that need to be right or to win the argument.
Mhm.
It can make it really hard to let go and extend that olive branch.
It's hard to swallow your pride sometimes.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about why forgiveness is important, and we've uncovered some reasons why it can be so challenging. But now let's get practical. How do we actually put this into practice in our relationships? What can we do starting today to make this a reality?
That's the million-dollar question, right? The good news is there are concrete steps you can take.
Okay.
It all starts with acknowledging the hurt. Dr. Luskin, he emphasizes that you can't really let go of something until you've fully understood its impact.
Okay.
So think about how your partner's actions made you feel. Write it down in a journal, talk it out with a trusted friend, or even express it through art. The key is to get those feelings out in the open so you can process them.
It's like you need to face the wound before you can actually heal it.
Exactly.
So step one, acknowledge the hurt.
Yes.
What's next?
Next comes open and honest communication.
Okay.
Dr. Sue Johnson, we mentioned her earlier, she reminds us that forgiveness requires genuine dialogue. It's a space where both partners can acknowledge the hurt, express remorse, and truly listen to each other's perspectives.
It's not just about saying I'm sorry and moving on.
No, it's about demonstrating empathy and a willingness to repair the damage that was done.
So it's about creating that safe space where both partners can be vulnerable and express their feelings without fear of judgment.
Exactly. And once you've had that open and honest conversation, it's time for step 3, shifting your focus to the future.
Okay.
It's about letting go of the past and consciously choosing to move forward together.
I like that dwelling on the past isn't going to get us anywhere. But how do we actually shift that focus? What does that look like in action?
It's about setting those clear boundaries we were talking about before.
Okay.
It's about saying, I forgive you for what happened, but here's how we can prevent it from happening again.
So not dwelling on the past, but establishing a clear path forward.
Exactly. And boundaries, they're not about punishment. They're about creating a healthier, more respectful dynamic in the relationship.
So they're about setting those clear expectations for how you want to be treated.
Exactly. For example, let's say your partner has a habit of dismissing your feelings during arguments.
Ooh.
A boundary could be something like, hey, next time we disagree, I need you to listen to me respectfully, even if you don't agree with me.
So it's about protecting yourself while still being open to reconciliation.
Exactly. And the amazing thing is when you set those boundaries and communicate them effectively, it can actually deepen the trust and accountability in the relationship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it shows your partner that you value yourself and you're committed to creating a healthy dynamic.
I'm really starting to see how boundaries can be such a powerful tool for healing and growth.
Yeah.
What happens if those boundaries are crossed?
That's where consequences come in.
Yeah.
It's important to establish beforehand what will happen if a boundary is violated. It could be anything from taking a time out to seeking couples counseling.
Yeah.
The key is to have a plan in place so you're not scrambling to react in the heat of the moment.
It sounds like boundaries and consequences go hand in hand.
They absolutely do. Think of it this way. Boundaries without consequences are just empty words. It's the follow-through that really reinforces the importance of those boundaries and helps create that sense of safety and trust.
Okay, in addition to setting those external boundaries with our partners,
Yes.
it sounds like there's another crucial piece of the forgiveness puzzle that we need to explore.
Uh-huh.
You're talking about self-forgiveness, right?
Yes. Self-forgiveness is so crucial and so often overlooked.
It's amazing how much this keeps coming up.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it's because we can be so hard on ourselves. We hold on to guilt and shame long after we've forgiven others.
Oh, I know that all too well.
Yeah.
What are some of those big challenges people face when they're trying to forgive themselves?
One of the biggest is that inner critic we were talking about, that voice in our heads that loves to replay our mistakes and remind us of our shortcomings.
Yes. It's like having this constant negative commentary running in the background.
Exactly. And when that voice is in overdrive, it can make it nearly impossible to extend ourselves the same grace and compassion that we offer to others.
How do we break free from that cycle? How do we silence that inner critic and make space for self-forgiveness?
It starts with awareness. Notice when that negative self-talk kicks in. Pay attention to the words you're using to describe yourself. And your actions, are they kind and compassionate, or are they harsh and judgmental? Once you start to become aware of those patterns, you can begin to challenge them.
Okay, that makes sense. But sometimes, even when I catch myself being self-critical, it's hard to shift gears.
Yeah.
Any tips for actually challenging those negative thoughts?
This is where a little role-playing can be helpful.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, would I talk to a dear friend this way if they made the same mistake?
Yeah.
Probably not right. You'd be much more understanding and compassionate. So why not offer yourself that same level of kindness? Remember, we're all human. We all make mistakes. It's part of learning and growing.
It's like we need to become our own best friend.
Exactly. And another helpful technique is to shift your focus from the past to the present moment.
Okay.
Instead of dwelling on what you did wrong, ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? How can I use this as an opportunity to grow and become a better version of myself?
It's about seeing our mistakes not as failures, but as like stepping stones on the path to growth.
Exactly. And once you start to view yourself through that lens of compassion and understanding, self-forgiveness becomes much more attainable.
It's about releasing the guilt and shame and embracing the possibility of a fresh start.
Exactly.
This has been so eye-opening already. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of this whole concept of forgiveness.
Yeah.
But let's get even more practical and explore some specific scenarios where this all plays out in the messy reality of those romantic relationships.
Okay. I'm happy to dive into some real-life examples.
Yeah, because I think our listeners are probably eager to see how all of this actually looks in action. So let's start with something I think a lot of people can relate to. Let's say your partner forgets your anniversary.
Oh.
Not just like a little, oops, I'm running late, but full-blown memory lapse.
Yeah.
That's gotta sting, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would feel hurt and maybe even a little unimportant.
Exactly. And that's where that first step we talked about, acknowledging the hurt, comes in.
Right.
It's crucial to recognize those feelings of disappointment, maybe even a little anger,
Yeah.
and not try to sweep them under the rug.
It's actually healthy to allow ourselves to feel those negative emotions, to let ourselves be hurt.
It really is. Bottling them up will only lead to resentment down the road. Give yourself permission to feel the pain and to process those emotions.
Yeah.
But here's the key. Once you've acknowledged the hurt, it's important to communicate it to your partner in a way that invites understanding rather than blame.
That's a good point. It's not about launching into a lecture about how important anniversaries are. It's more about expressing your feelings in a vulnerable and authentic way.
Exactly. So instead of saying, you always forget important dates, you clearly don't care about me,
Right.
you might try saying something like, hey, I felt really hurt when you forgot our anniversary. It made me feel like our special day wasn't important to you.
That's so much more effective. It's about sharing your feelings without attacking your partner.
Yeah.
But what if they get defensive or try to minimize your feelings?
That can definitely happen. And that's where active listening comes in.
Hmm.
Encourage your partner to share their perspective.
Okay.
Maybe they're incredibly stressed at work, or maybe they've got something else weighing on their mind.
Yeah.
The goal here isn't to win an argument, it's to understand each other's feelings and find that common ground where forgiveness can take root.
That makes sense. It's about creating that space for empathy and understanding, even when it's tough.
Yeah.
So once you've both had a chance to express yourselves, where do you go from there?
It's time to shift the focus to the future. This is where those boundaries we talked about earlier come into play.
Yeah.
What can you do to prevent this from happening again? Maybe set a reminder on their phone.
Oh, yeah.
Or plan a special date night a few days before the actual anniversary.
So it's about finding solutions together instead of getting stuck in that blame game.
Exactly.
And we can't forget about self-compassion, right?
Oh,
If you're the one who forgot the anniversary, don't beat yourself up. Everyone makes mistakes. Acknowledge the hurt you caused, apologize sincerely, and commit to doing better next time.
exactly.
Okay, so we talked about a forgotten anniversary.
Yeah.
But what about a more serious situation like infidelity? Can forgiveness really work in a scenario like that?
That's a really tough one, and there's
Yeah.
no easy answer.
Yeah.
Infidelity can inflict some deep wounds, and the healing process is often long and complex.
It's like a whole other level.
Yeah.
So how can forgiveness even be possible when the betrayal cuts that deep?
It starts with acknowledging the immense pain and anger that the betrayed partner is experiencing.
Mhm.
This isn't about brushing it under the rug or minimizing the hurt. It's about validating those raw, intense emotions
Okay.
and creating a space for them to be expressed and processed.
And what about the person who is unfaithful? What role did they play in this?
They need to take full responsibility for their actions. There needs to be genuine remorse, a sincere apology, and a willingness to do whatever it takes to rebuild trust.
And that's not just about words, right?
No, it's about consistent actions over time that demonstrate a true commitment to change.
So it's about proving through their behavior that they're truly sorry and that they're dedicated to earning back that trust.
Exactly.
What does that look like in practical terms?
It could involve being completely transparent, accountable for their whereabouts, and willing to answer any questions their partner might have.
Okay.
It might also mean going to therapy individually or as a couple to work through the underlying issues that led to the infidelity.
It sounds like there's no quick fix when it comes to healing from infidelity.
You're right. It's a journey. And for the betrayed partner, forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. And it often involves working through a lot of difficult emotions, maybe even with the help of a therapist.
Like professional guidance could be really valuable
Yeah,
in navigating a situation like that.
absolutely. And even if the couple ultimately decides to go their separate ways, forgiveness can still be a powerful tool for healing and moving forward.
Oh, wow. So even if the relationship doesn't survive,
Yeah,
forgiveness can still offer a path toward personal peace and growth.
absolutely. It's about releasing yourself from that bitterness and resentment, even if you choose not to reconcile.
So it's about choosing peace over prolonged pain.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've explored those big scenarios like forgotten anniversaries and infidelity, but what about those everyday conflicts that can really chip away at a relationship over time? Those little annoyances that, if left unchecked, can build into some major resentment.
Ah, yeah. The death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Exactly, like leaving dirty dishes in the sink or forgetting to take out the trash.
Yeah, those little things.
So how do we apply forgiveness in those everyday squabbles? Does it really matter if we're just talking about dirty dishes?
It absolutely matters. Remember, forgiveness isn't just about those major transgressions. It's about cultivating a forgiving spirit in those small moments, too.
Oh.
It's about choosing love over resentment,
Yeah.
even in those like messy, imperfect moments that make up everyday life.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we prevent those little annoyances from turning into those huge blowouts?
It starts with awareness. Try to catch yourself before you launch into a full-blown argument.
Okay.
Take a deep breath. Approach the situation with a sense of humor and understanding. So instead of snapping, "Why do you always leave your dishes in the sink? It's so disrespectful." Try something like, "Hey, honey, I know you're super busy, but could you please try to remember to put your dishes in the dishwasher?"
It's about expressing your needs in a way that invites cooperation rather than creating conflict. Exactly.
I like that approach.
And if you're on the receiving end of the request, try to respond with empathy and a willingness to make a change.
Okay.
Maybe say something like, You're right, I've been a bit careless lately. I'll make a conscious effort to be more mindful.
It's about meeting each other halfway,
Yeah.
finding that balance between expressing your needs and being understanding of your partner's imperfections.
Exactly. And remember, forgiveness in those small moments, it's like a muscle that we need to exercise regularly.
Oh, I like that.
By letting go of those petty annoyances, we build up a reservoir of compassion and understanding that will serve us well when those bigger challenges inevitably arise.
It's like we're building up our forgiveness stamina, so we're ready to tackle those bigger hurdles when they come along.
Exactly. But what about those times when we just can't seem to let go? What if the hurt is too deep, the anger too intense to even fathom the idea of forgiveness?
That's a great question because sometimes, even when we understand the benefits of forgiveness,
Right.
it can feel impossible to actually get there. You're so right. And in those situations, it's important to be patient with yourself.
Okay.
Forgiveness isn't a race. There's no deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Allow yourself the time and space to process your emotions, to grieve the hurt, and to slowly work toward a place of healing.
So it's okay to take your time to honor the pain and not to force forgiveness before you're ready.
Absolutely. And if you're finding it difficult to navigate this process on your own, don't hesitate to seek professional help. A therapist can provide a safe and supportive environment to explore your feelings, to challenge those negative thought patterns, and to develop healthy coping mechanisms.
That's a good reminder that sometimes we need a little extra support to navigate the more challenging terrain of our emotional lives.
We do. And as you're working toward forgiveness, try to shift your focus from the person who hurt you to the pain that you're carrying.
Okay.
Remember, forgiveness is not about condoning their actions. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of that pain.
It's about reclaiming your power and choosing to heal for your own well-being rather than for the benefit of the person who hurt you.
Exactly. And as you begin to release that pain,
Hmm.
you might find that a sense of peace and compassion starts to emerge. And that compassion, both for yourself and for the other person, can be a powerful catalyst for forgiveness.
That's such a powerful reminder that forgiveness is ultimately about liberation. It's about choosing to step out of the darkness of anger and resentment and into the light of healing and peace. This has been an incredible deep dive so far into the world of forgiveness.
Yeah, it really has.
I feel like we've already gained so much insight into its power and its complexity, both in terms of forgiving others and forgiving ourselves.
And I think we've given our listeners some really valuable tools and insights to cultivate a more forgiving and compassionate approach to their relationships.
Absolutely. Something tells me
Yeah.
there's still more to uncover,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to putting all of this into practice in a way that truly protects our hearts.
you're right.
So let's dive even deeper, shall we?
Let's do it. And that's where the concept of boundaries comes in. We touched on this earlier, but I think it deserves a deeper exploration.
Yeah, I think so too, because boundaries can be a tricky thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of people think of them as being controlling or restrictive.
Right. It can feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really not about that at all.
Okay.
Boundaries are actually about creating safety and clarity in the relationship.
Oh, I like that.
It's about setting those clear expectations for how you want to be treated and what you're willing to tolerate.
So it's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, okay, this is what I'm okay with and this is what I'm not okay with.
Exactly. And when you set those boundaries, it actually allows for more freedom and intimacy in the relationship.
Oh, that's interesting because it sounds counterintuitive.
It does.
Yeah.
But think about it. When you know where you stand with each other, you can relax and be more vulnerable because you feel safe and respected.
Like you're not constantly walking on eggshells or worrying about saying or doing the wrong thing.
That's exactly.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how boundaries can be a powerful tool for healing and growth. But how do we actually go about setting those boundaries in a way that feels empowering rather than controlling?
That's a great question. The first step is to get really clear on your own non-negotiables.
Yeah.
Ask yourself what behaviors are absolutely unacceptable to me. Once you've identified those, it's important to communicate them to your partner in a clear and assertive way without blaming or attacking them.
So it's about having an open and honest conversation about your needs and expectations.
Exactly. And when you're communicating those boundaries, try to focus on your own feelings and experiences.
Okay.
So instead of saying, you always do this, you never do that.
Which can feel very accusatory.
Yep.
Okay.
Try something like, when you do this, it makes me feel hurt and disrespected in the future. I need you to do this instead.
So it's about owning your experience and expressing your needs in a way that invites collaboration rather than defensiveness.
Exactly. It's about working together to create a dynamic that feels good for both of you.
I love that. But what happens if those boundaries are crossed even after you've clearly communicated them?
That's where consequences come in. It's important to establish beforehand what will happen if a boundary is violated. This could be anything from taking a time out to seeking couples counseling. The key is to have a plan in place so you're not scrambling to react in the heat of the moment.
It sounds like boundaries and consequences go hand in hand.
They absolutely do. Think of it this way. Boundaries without consequences are just empty words.
You have to back it up.
Exactly. It's the follow-through that really reinforces the importance of those boundaries, and it helps create that sense of safety and trust.
Okay, so in addition to setting those external boundaries with our partners,
Yes.
it sounds like there's another crucial piece of this whole forgiveness puzzle that we haven't fully explored yet.
Yes, there is.
You're talking about self-forgiveness, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's so important because sometimes we can be so much harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anyone else.
Oh, it's so true.
We hold on to guilt and shame long after we've forgiven others, and that can really sabotage our happiness and well-being.
Ugh, I've definitely been there. I think we've all been there. So what are some of the biggest challenges that people face when it comes to forgiving themselves?
One of the biggest is that pesky inner critic we were talking about earlier. That voice in our heads that loves to replay our mistakes and remind us of all our shortcomings.
Oh, that voice.
Yeah, it can be brutal. And when that voice is in overdrive, it can make it nearly impossible to extend ourselves the same grace and compassion that we offer to others.
It's like we have a different standard for ourselves than we do for everyone else.
Exactly.
So how do we quiet that inner critic and make space for self-forgiveness?
It starts with awareness. Notice when that negative self-talk starts to spiral, and then gently challenge those thoughts.
Okay.
Ask yourself, would I talk to a friend this way if they made the same mistake? Chances are you'd be much more understanding and compassionate with them than you are with yourself.
That's a good point.
So why not offer yourself that same level of kindness?
So it's about recognizing that we're human and we're allowed to make mistakes.
Exactly. And that's why practicing self-compassion is so crucial. It's
Yeah.
about treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and forgiveness that you would offer to a loved one.
So it's about replacing that harsh self-criticism with a more supportive and nurturing inner dialogue.
Exactly.
What are some ways we can actually practice self-compassion?
There's so many great techniques out there. One powerful one is to simply talk to yourself the way you would talk to a dear friend.
Okay.
Offer yourself words of encouragement, validation, and support.
So simple, but I bet it's really effective.
It really is. And another helpful practice is to write yourself a letter of forgiveness,
Ooh, I like that.
acknowledging your mistakes, but also recognizing your strengths and the lessons you've learned.
It's like giving yourself permission to let go of the past and embrace a fresh start.
Exactly. And remember, self-forgiveness, just like forgiveness in general, it's a process, not a destination. There will be ups and downs, days when you feel strong and compassionate and days when that inner critic creeps back in. But the key is to keep practicing, to keep choosing kindness and understanding both towards yourself and others.
I love that. So it's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
This has been such an incredible deep dive into the world of forgiveness. I feel like we've gained a whole new understanding of its power and complexity, both in terms of forgiving others and forgiving ourselves.
I agree. And I think we've given our listeners some really valuable tools and insights to cultivate a more forgiving and compassionate approach to their relationships.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. We've talked about the benefits of forgiveness, we've talked about the challenges, and we've explored some practical steps, but ultimately, the choice to forgive is a deeply personal one.
It is.
And it's a choice that we have the power to make every single day.
That's so true.
So as you go about your week, I encourage you to reflect on the areas of your life where forgiveness might be needed, whether it's in your romantic relationships, your friendships, your family, or even within yourself. And remember, forgiveness isn't a sign of weakness. It's an act of courage, strength, and ultimately deep self-love.
Beautifully said. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself as much as to the person you're forgiving. It's a path towards healing, growth, and ultimately a deeper connection with yourself and those you love.
And something tells me there's still more to uncover, especially when it comes to putting all of this into practice in a way that truly protects our hearts. So let's dive even deeper, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of forgiveness, we've talked about the challenges, we've explored some practical steps, but ultimately the choice to forgive is a deeply personal one.
It is.
And it's a choice that we have the power to make every single day.
That's so true.
So, as you go about your week, I encourage you to reflect on the areas of your life where forgiveness might be needed, whether it's in your romantic relationships, your friendships, your family, or even within yourself.
Hmm.
And remember, forgiveness isn't a sign of weakness, it's an act of courage, strength, and ultimately deep self love.
Beautifully said. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself as much as to the person you're forgiving. It's a path towards healing growth and ultimately a deeper connection with yourself and those you love,